So we check in with Kevin Iole on the sport of boxing, and there's a lot of follow-up, a lot of unanswered questions on the negotiations or lack thereof. Who knows what went down? You can tell us between Arum, Greenberg, Al Heyman, the Mayweather-Pacquiao efforts to get that fight going. We've heard now stories on both sides. So what's the real story, Kevin? What happened?
Well, it's one of the most bizarre things, Steve, that I've ever seen occur. Bob Arum says that they have resolved all issues, that everything was done. I'd reported, as I mentioned, that it was Al Heyman that he was negotiating with, although I had to say sources said, because I couldn't confirm that on the record. Bob wouldn't confirm it. Al Heyman doesn't speak to the media. Richard Schaefer declined comment on any aspect of it. Then Bob decided to put a deadline on Mayweather to accept an offer, which essentially told me right away that there was no fight going to happen, because Mayweather is not going to accept the deadline from Bob Arum. Even if Floyd was about to say yes and I want to take the fight, the relationship that Floyd and Arum have and the type of personality that Floyd is, he's not going to let anybody dictate to him. He's going to be the one dictating the terms, and he's going to one that says jump and make somebody else say how high. So as soon as I saw Top Rank put a countdown on, I knew exactly that the fight was not going to happen, at least not at this stage, and wasn't going to be announced. The only thing that surprised me about the midnight conference call, Pacific time, 3 a.m. Eastern time, conference call that Top Rank called Friday night / Saturday morning, was that they didn't announce that they already had a contract with somebody else to fight Pacquiao. It was just a bizarre thing. But Arum on that conference call then revealed that, in fact, he had negotiated with Al Heyman through HBO's Ross Greenberg. And that's the key thing. He said on the call, I never spoke to Golden Boy, I never spoke to Al Heyman, I never spoke to Mayweather. So those are the principles involved in he didn't mention him by name, but Leonard Ellerby was also implicit in that because he's on the Mayweather side. Bob said he never spoke to them, but he spoke to Ross Greenberg, who was carrying messages back and forth between them. So Arum speculated on that conference call that the reason Floyd didn't want to fight was because of Roger Mayweather's impending trial on August 2nd. Roger is Floyd's uncle. He's also Floyd's trainer. He's facing charges here in Las Vegas on assault and battery on a female boxer that he once trained, and could spend a few months in jail if he's convicted of that. So Arum speculated that perhaps that was the reason why Floyd wasn't accepting of terms. A few days later, Mayweather's side breaks silence. Leonard Ellerby puts out a statement that says there have never been any negotiations with the Mayweather side in Arum for a Pacquiao-Mayweather fight, and that somebody's lying in this instance, and that we know who the liar is, inferring that it was Arum. HBO's Ross Greenberg could clear all this up by just saying, hey, I talked to Arum or I didn't talk to Arum. He could just absolutely clear it up, but he's refusing comment. So, he's really putting somebody in a bad spot, but he's making this thing get all the worse. I called HBO twice looking for comment, both times told Ross is not commenting on it. HBO doesn't want any part of it. So now we're left out there to speculate. Was Arum telling the truth? Was Ellerby telling the truth? Or was it somewhere in the middle? Or maybe there's nuances that they're just not getting into. And I suspect it's somewhere in the middle. I don't think Arum would flat lie and say he was talking to Ross Greenberg about this if he wasn't, because it would be easy in that case, Steve, for Ross just to say, no, I never had contact with Bob Arum, and he has done that before. But I don't think Leonard Ellerby would put the statement out that he did if there weren't. But I think it's going to be the definition of negotiation, and I think that might be where this is coming. It's kind of like when Bill Clinton had that Monica Lewinsky problem, and he had to define a word. I think that's the same situation that's going on here.
So you're right. The debate at hand is negotiations. I read a story today by David Mayo, who writes in Michigan and is very tight with the Mayweather camp, and he said, number one, negotiations does not mean Arum talking to Greenberg and here's an offer and getting no response. You use the term back and forth, passing messages between each other. So that's the first thing that's up for debate. And the second thing that David Mayo mentioned was to even suggest that there's going to be a 50-50 split when Mayweather has the majority of the sales value, the marketability in this thing would be ridiculous, and no one would even approach Floyd with a 50-50 split. I have great respect for David, but I had some problems with that column, frankly.
he's in Grand Rapids, which is Mayweather's hometown. But David, I think has been an outstanding journalist all along. But I disagree with his column on that one, and I'll tell you why. Number one, they agreed on a 50-50 split the first time around. They couldn't make a deal based on the drug testing issue, but they had agreed on a 50-50 purse split. Now maybe Mayweather did a better pay-per-view number against Mosley than Pacquiao did against Josh Clottey, and maybe he'll say no. But the history would tell us he did agree to a 50-50 purse split. So I would say, first of all, we don't know that. And also, David's column essentially, to me, went down and ran down the line and said, Mayweather has all this value, all this value. I agree. Mayweather has tremendous value. He's, a huge star in boxing. But so is Manny Pacquiao, and I think there's value on both sides. And David's column gave Mayweather all the credit and more, and failed to acknowledge that Manny Pacquiao brings a lot to the table. Manny Pacquiao is a guy that sold 51,000 seats in Cowboy Stadium. Joshua Clottey, I don't think, sold one of those tickets. And Pacquiao sold 750,000 pay-per-views. I don't think anybody was buying that to see Joshua Clottey. They were buying for Manny Pacquiao. Whereas in a Mayweather-Mosley fight, there was a little bit more of an attraction because it was perceived going in that it was a tougher fight. And Shane Mosley certainly was a guy that had sold on pay-per-view before. So, I think both fighters had value. And while maybe I think ultimately in the end Mayweather might get and might deserve more money than Pacquiao because he's had better success against common opponents. I still don't think that, to say it's ludicrous and that they would never even consider it, I think is over the top.
He also suggested that this was the game plan all along. Arum really hasn't negotiated at all, kind of was in bad faith in this whole deal and his original concept. And he actually said, I guess he did an off the record and then made it on the record where Ellerbe predicted everything that would go down, and that the plan from the beginning was to fight Cotto Margarito and keep the money in-house for Pac-Man and Top Rank.
Well, if you remember, and if you go back into my archives, I wrote a column in January in which I said after the negotiations for the first time blew up, I said Arum never really wanted the fight in the first place. He doesn't like the Mayweather people, really intensely dislikes Al Heyman, really intensely dislikes Floyd, really intensely dislikes Leonard Ellerbe, and I don't think it's any secret to the world that he's not a big fan of Richard Schaefer and Golden Boy Promotions. So as a result of that, Steve, I wrote the first time, I said, I don't think Arum really wanted this. He negotiated that first time because there was so much public demand, and he knew, hey, this is going to be an enormous financial success, so he was willing to grit his teeth and bear it. But at the first sign that there became trouble, he said, okay, the fight's off, and really was willing to back out. It's because he just didn't want to commit at 78 years old 4 months of his life to dealing with people he disliked so much. Whether that's right or whether that's wrong, that's what it was. And after I wrote that column, this is important to note, the day that column came out, Arum had a press conference in Las Vegas, and I attended that press conference. It was about a totally unrelated subject. I attended that press conference, and Arum came up to me, and I thought he was going to scream at me about the column, but instead what he said was, you were right on the point. He goes, how did you know? That's 100% right. Wow. So now I think, basically we're at the same situation. I think Bob's intention, I would not call Bob a liar. I mean, people who don't know better take cheap shots at him all the time and say that, Bob, he is definitely not a liar, and so I take Bob at his word that he had talked. Bob is a spinner, and Bob will spin to his side, no doubt about it. But I don't think he's going to flat make something up like saying negotiations took place that didn't take place. But I think what went on here was this. Again, he opened it and said, okay, unlike last time, we're shooting for March, and so we. A very short window. I think this time around, he was saying, okay, we have many more months, we can get it done. When he realized it wasn't going to happen this time around, I think it was the same thing. You know what? I'm done with these people. They're nuts. I can't figure them out. I don't want to get involved. And I think really that's what this was.
All right. Next May. Are we dealing with the same thing, say around January, February? What's in the way? What's in the way of the fight next year, Kevin?
I hope not. I'm hoping that at some point in December or January, I could say, "Hey, surprise! There's a fight, and it's happened." the public wants it so badly, and hopefully one of these guys doesn't lose in the interim before the fight does come about.